Alexander Hayes was a man the world respected and feared in equal measure. At just 45, he had conquered the tech world, built a billion-dollar empire, and stamped his name across the skylines of New York, Dubai, and Tokyo. He was known for his brilliance, his ruthlessness, and most of all, his detachment. Investors called him a genius. Journalists called him the Ghost CEO, a man who avoided the spotlight and seemed to live only for boardrooms and spreadsheets. But behind the calculated silence was a life scarred by grief. 3 years earlier, Alexander had lost his wife Amelia, the only person who ever softened him. The illness came suddenly and took her quickly, leaving behind an empty mansion and a son who would never fully understand why mommy never came home. Ethan, now 5, was born with a rare condition that weakened his legs. From the very beginning, he needed crutches to stand, therapy to move, and patience to grow. But none of that came from his father, though Alexander loved Ethan. The pain of losing Amelia drove him deeper into work, into control, into silence. His way of coping was avoidance, leaving the house before sunrise, returning long after bedtime. Ethan grew up surrounded by staff, by quiet nurses and tutors, strangers who clocked in and out. The only true warmth in his life came from one person, a soft-spoken, 28-year-old housemaid named Sophia Ramirez. Sophia had been hired to clean and occasionally help with Ethan when others were busy. She had no titles, no degrees, but a patience and kindness that no paycheck could buy. She tied her hair back, kept to herself, and never stepped out of line. Alexander barely noticed her dot until one unexpected evening when a meeting ended earlier than scheduled. And he came home without warning. What he saw when he stepped through the doors of his estate would not only freeze him in place, it would shatter everything he thought he knew about love, fatherhood, and the quiet strength of a woman's society. Would never call important. That moment would become the beginning of a story he never saw coming. When Alexander pushed open the heavy doors of his mansion, the silence he expected wasn't there. Instead, soft laughter echoed faintly from the living room, a gentle sound he hadn't heard in what felt like ages. As he stepped in, the sight that greeted him made him stop mid-stride. There, on the polished marble floor, Sophia was crouched. Beside a bucket, sleeves rolled up, scrubbing with quiet focus. Just beside her, Ethan balanced shakily on his crutches, dragging a small cloth across the tiles with unsteady determination. His blonde hair clung to his forehead with sweat, his tiny legs trembling with the effort, but his face glowed with pride. "Taya, Sophia, I can do this part," he said with a breathless grin, and Sophia nodded with warmth in her voice, reminding him not to overwork himself. Alexander didn't know what hit him harder, seeing his son so alive and engaged, or the way Ethan looked at Sophia with such affection and trust. He stood silently, still half shielded by the shadow of the doorway, watching as Ethan insisted they were a team and should clean together. Sophia gently urged him to rest, but gave in to his determination with a smile, calling him her little assistant. And then Ethan looked up and noticed him. His blue eyes widened with excitement and nervousness, and he nearly toppled trying to turn too fast. "Dad, you're home early," he blurted out. Sophia jumped to her feet, wiping her hands on her apron, a nervous breath catching in her throat as she greeted Alexander. Startled by his unexpected presence, Alexander could barely speak. His gaze flicked from his son's flushed cheeks to the maid's dirt-stained knees. "Ethan, what are you doing?" The boy lifted his chin, full of pride, explaining that he'd stood by himself for 5 whole minutes. Sophia stayed quiet, her hands clenched, bracing for anger. 5 minutes, Alexander repeated, stunned. The boy beamed, declaring that Taye, Sophia helped him practice every day and told him that if he tried hard enough, one day he'd run like the other kids. The words hung in the air like thunder before a storm, shaking something loose in Alexander he hadn't felt in years, He turned to Sophia, and she quickly tried to downplay it, saying she was only playing, that she never meant to overstep. But Ethan wasn't having it. He rushed to stand between them, declaring that Sophia was the best, that she never left when he cried, and told him he was strong like a warrior. Alexander's chest ached. He couldn't remember the last time he had truly spoken with his son, let alone seen him so alive. He cleared his throat, struggling to steady his voice. "Ethan, go to your room for a moment. I need to speak with Tia Sophia." The boy looked up, confused and reluctant. Sophia gave him a nod, silently reassuring him. As Ethan hobbled toward the stairs, he glanced back and called out, "Tia Sophia is the best person in the world." Now alone with her, Alexander stepped forward slowly. He took in the rawness of her hands, the worn knees of her pants, the way she seemed so small in this grand house. "How long have you been doing this with Ethan?" She explained it had been about 6 months, always on her own time, never during work hours, never asking for anything in return. "And why?" he asked. Sophia answered without hesitation, "Because Ethan never gives up. Because he had a big heart. Because he deserved more than pain and silence." Her voice was steady, but her eyes glistened. Alexander felt her words cut through the years of distance he'd built around himself. "Where did you learn this?" he asked, already sensing there was more beneath her gentle exterior. Sophia admitted that her younger brother had been born with similar challenges, and she'd grown up learning everything she could to help him walk. Physical therapy sessions, exercises, stretching routines, she'd absorbed it all. And now, seeing Ethan's loneliness, she couldn't bear to stand by. Alexander didn't speak for a long time. The silence between them was heavy, but not cruel. He asked if she wanted to stop. She said she would if he wanted her to, but her only wish had been to make Ethan smile more. He hadn't even realized how long it had been since he'd seen his son truly smile. He asked her then quietly why someone like her, who clearly understood therapy and children, was working as a housemaid. Sophia gave a sad smile and said that without a degree, none of what she knew mattered. She worked because she had to, because her younger brother Carlos still needed help, because her mother cleaned offices at night, and because someone had to hold the family together. Alexander listened without interrupting. Every detail, every piece of her life was a reminder of how much he didn't know, how much he had overlooked, even inside his own home. He finally said, "Show me what you've been doing with Ethan." Sophia hesitated. "The boy was in pajamas already," she said, "and they usually trained early in the morning before anyone else was awake. She prepared his breakfast, took him out into the garden before classes began, and made sure he was cleaned up before the rest of the house stirred." Alexander was stunned. That routine, that dedication, it had been happening right under his roof, and he'd known nothing about it. "Does Ethan like it?" he asked. She smiled gently. "He loves it. It hurt at first, but now he asks to do it." Just yesterday, she said, he stood for 3 minutes on his own. Alexander's eyes widened. His own hired therapist had said such progress would take many more months. Sophia added, almost shyly, that maybe Ethan had extra motivation. He wanted to impress her. And maybe he wanted to impress his father too. At that moment, the soft thumping of crutches echoed from the stairs. Ethan peeked down, whispering, "Dad, you're still here." Alexander turned to see Ethan halfway down the staircase, gripping the railing tightly in one hand and his crutch in the other. His voice was soft but edged with worry. "You're not going to send Tia Sophia away, are you?" Alexander froze, his throat tightening. "Why would you think that?" Ethan looked down, eyes wide, his voice barely above a whisper. "Because you were serious earlier. Mom used to send the maids away when they did something she didn't like." Alexander glanced at Sophia. Her head was bowed again, her body still, as though she expected the same fate. He knelt down, meeting his son's eye. "Ethan, do you like Sophia?" The boy didn't hesitate. "I like her a lot. She's my best friend." Alexander's voice dropped. "And what makes her your best friend?" Ethan tilted his head, thinking carefully, then said, "Because she plays with me. She listens. She never rushes me. She says I'm brave. She says one day I'll walk like everyone else." Alexander felt something shift in his chest. "And me?" he asked gently. "Am I your friend?" Ethan was quiet, then said, "You're my dad. Not really a friend. Dad is important. But a friend is the one who's always there." The answer struck him harder than he could have imagined. He turned to Sophia and saw her wiping her eyes. Alexander faced Ethan again. "I want to be your friend too," he said. "Will you let me try?" The boy's face lit up. "Really? Being friends means you have to play with me and listen to my stories and watch me practice with T.I. Sophia. You'll come to the garden tomorrow, right?" Alexander smiled. "I'll be there." "I promise." Ethan beamed, threw his arms around his father, then climbed back upstairs, his crutches clicking against the hardwood. When he was gone, Alexander turned to Sophia. The next morning, he rose before the sun, dressed simply, and walked downstairs. The kitchen was warm and filled with the smell of fresh batter. Sophia was at the stove, humming softly, pouring pancakes with practiced rhythm. "Good morning, Sophia," he said. She jumped slightly. "Mr. Hayes, you're up early." "Is Ethan still asleep?" She nodded. "He wakes around 7:30. Then we start training in the garden at 8. Alexander checked the clock. It was only 7:15. "Can I help with breakfast?" he asked. Sophia blinked. "You want to cook?" "Of course. What does Ethan like?" "Hot cakes," she said. "Every Monday. He says they give him strength." Alexander chuckled. "I never knew that." Sophia smiled. "He always says so. It gives him motivation." Alexander watched her flip the pancakes, the way she focused, how every motion seemed to be filled with care. She wasn't just cooking. She was building joy into his son's morning. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Why do you care so much about Ethan?" Sophia paused for a second, her hand stilling. "When I was a child, my little brother Carlos had weak legs too. He couldn't keep up with other kids. I remember how he looked at them, wanting to join in. So I became his friend. I made up games he could play. I encouraged him to keep trying. He's in high school now. He still struggles sometimes, but he never gives up. And you want that strength for Ethan? I want him to believe in himself. And with a family like his, he can go even further than Carlos ever could." Alexander's heart squeezed. His son had everything money could buy, but not the time, the support, the presence that mattered. Not until now, and it wasn't from him. It was from her. Just then, Ethan hobbled into the kitchen, his hair messy, one crutch in hand. "Dad, you didn't go to work?" Alexander bent down with a smile. "Good morning, champ. I stayed home to watch. You train, remember?" Ethan's eyes widened with joy. "Really? You'll see how strong I've gotten. But first, hot cakes, right? Sophia made them just for you." Ethan laughed and moved as quickly as he could to the table. As they ate, Alexander watched the boy closely, how he laughed with Sophia, how he shared stories about his dreams, how he glowed with confidence. "Dad, did you know I climbed 3 stairs by myself yesterday?" "Really?" Alexander said, astonished. "And I even do warm-ups now. Like grown-ups." T.I. Sophia says muscles need to be ready. Alexander looked at Sophia. He could see it clearly now. She wasn't improvising. She knew exactly what she was doing. At exactly 8 o'clock, they stepped into the garden. The morning sun lit the trimmed grass in golden hues. Sophia laid out a mat. "Come on, Ethan. Let's stretch first." The boy lay down, performing each move with a seriousness that stunned Alexander. Sophia helped him stand. "Try 30 seconds without the crutches," she said. If you do that, we'll aim for 45 tomorrow. Ethan nodded. I want to try a full minute. Sophia cautioned him gently. Slow is okay. 30 is already great. Ethan took a deep breath, let go of the crutches. Alexander stood frozen. The boy's knees wobbled. His arms spread slightly. He shook, but stayed up. 15 seconds. Sophia counted softly. See that, Dad? Ethan called. I see it. You're incredible. 25, 30. Ethan stumbled just. After the final count, Sophia caught him gently. I did it. A whole 30 seconds. Alexander swept his son into his arms. I'm so proud of you, he whispered. And now, Ethan said, beaming, now you know why I love training with Tia Sophia. Alexander looked up at her, the morning light glowing behind her calm, patient smile. I understand, he said. The days that followed unfolded like chapters in a story Alexander had never imagined himself living. Gone were the early exits before. Dawn, the rushed suits and tight calls in glass towers. Mornings became sacred. He stayed for breakfast. He watched the stretches, the balancing, the trembling legs, and brave attempts. And every time Ethan stood a little taller or took a step with more confidence, Alexander felt something inside him mend. The mansion, once echoing with silence, began to fill with new sounds: laughter, light footsteps, the rustle of leaves in the garden, the occasional cheer of a child who had just accomplished the impossible. One afternoon, while Ethan was drawing dinosaurs in his room, Alexander invited Sophia into the library. The tall shelves that once loomed cold and untouchable now glowed with afternoon light. He stood near the window, nervous in a way he hadn't felt in decades. Sophia, he said quietly, I need to thank you. You've given Ethan more than progress. You've given him hope. And you've given it to me too. She shook her head, voice soft. Mr. Hayes, I only did what anyone would. I never expected. He stopped her with a look, not harsh but sincere. That's exactly why I want to change things. I want you to stop being a maid. I want you to become Ethan's official therapeutic companion. No more scrubbing floors. Just focus on what you've already been doing, helping him grow. Sophia blinked, struggling to process the words. But I don't have a degree. Everything I know is from experience. That's not enough. Then I'll sponsor your education. Full tuition, supplies, books. You can study part-time. And while you do, you'll continue working with Ethan. You'll receive a higher salary. And I'll ensure your mother and brother are supported too. Tears welled in her eyes. Why would you do that for me? For Ethan, first and foremost. My son needs you. Not just for therapy, but for the trust he has in you. And for you, Sophia, because I see something rare in you. Someone who deserves more than what life has handed her. Her voice broke. Mr. Hayes, I won't let you down. I promise. Word spread fast. High society circles buzzed with gossip. Alexander Hayes, the cold titan of tech, had let a maid into his inner circle. Ethan hesitated. His lips trembled, but he looked toward his father. Do you think I can? Alexander knelt, arms open. I know you can. Ethan nodded, took a breath, and let go. One shaky step. Then another. A third. Then he stumbled forward and fell into his father's arms, not crying but laughing, breathless with joy. Dad, I walked. I really walked. Alexander held him tight. My boy, you're amazing. Sophia stood nearby, her eyes glistening, her hands pressed to her lips. Ethan turned and shouted, Sophia, did you see? I saw everything, my little warrior. You did it. That night, Alexander sat alone in the garden, watching the stars. He heard soft footsteps behind him. Sophia joined him on the bench, quiet at first. He spoke without turning. It's been so long since I've seen Ethan smile like this. And just as long since I felt like I was actually alive. Sophia's voice was gentle. You did this, Mr. Hayes. He needed you. I only helped. Alexander shook his head. No, you brought light into a place I didn't know was dark. For a long time I believed I was done feeling anything. Then you came, their eyes met. Something unspoken passed between them, trust, admiration, a warmth they both thought lost to grief. In the silence that followed, something delicate began to take root. Not just duty, not just gratitude, but something that could one day become love. As the final vows were spoken beneath a canopy of soft lights and spring blossoms, Ethan raised both arms and cheered. Now we really are a team forever. His voice echoed through the garden, innocent and full of joy. Laughter followed, not just from the guests, but from deep within the hearts of those who had walked this long journey together. Alexander drew Sophia close, holding her hand tightly, his voice barely louder than a whisper. We've already built something more valuable than anything I've ever owned. This is everything. She smiled through tears, leaning into him as Ethan wrapped his arms around both of them. That evening, under a sky bursting with stars, the three of them stood at the edge of the garden, the very place where Ethan had first taken his steps. And there, without fanfare or applause, a new family was born. Not of wealth or status, but of resilience, tenderness, and love that had been tested and proven true. It was no longer the story of a lonely billionaire or a quiet maid. It was the story of a father rediscovered, a boy transformed, and a woman whose courage gave them all a second chance.